And the thing that came to my mind was to use a... Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in spirit of it being December and me wanting to become a better problem solver, I thought that I would participate in Advent of Code. If you're unfamiliar with what Advent of Code is essentially an advent calendar of 25 different problem solving questions. And each question is released on a day-to-day basis. So today is December 4th, so they've released already 4 different questions, and each and every single day you essentially would just solve the questions. They come in 2 different parts. You can solve them in any programming language you want, and in addition to that, it's also very good for interview prep, and also there is a leaderboard aspect to it as well, so you can challenge yourself with some of the other people that are participating in this event. So for today's video, I'm going to walk us through some of my day 1 solutions, and we'll kind of compare and contrast those. I'm on the Advent of Code website right here, and I'm currently on the day 1 challenge. I've already solved the day 1 challenge, as you can see, with my puzzle answer of part 1 as well as part 2. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to walk you through how I obtained my solution and hopefully give you some inspiration from these solutions as well. So we'll first start off with the prompt itself. So the prompt is, the jungle must be too overgrown and difficult to navigate in vehicles or access from the air. The elves' expedition traditionally goes on foot. As your boats approach land, the elves began taking inventory of their supplies. One important consideration is food, in particular the number of calories each elf is carrying, your puzzle input. The elves take turns writing down the number of calories contained by the various meals, snacks, rations, etc. that they've brought with them, 1 item per line. Each elf separates their inventory from the previous elf's inventory, if any, by a blank line. So that blank line is going to be a big indicator for us in terms of the input, so that we can differentiate between one elf and another. So for example, suppose the elves finish writing their items, calories, and end up with the following list. So in this, we can see that this is elf 1. There's a new line, so this means this is going to be elf 2. There's another new line, elf 3, new line, elf 4, new line, and here is the 5th elf. So to solve this problem, really all you really need to do, and I'll head over to Visual Studio Code, is you really need to determine whenever you reach a new line or a blank line, right? So what I did for this is you have a max count, and this is kind of the global max that I have, which is going to be, the elf with the highest amount of calories, and the current sum, which is going to be the current maximum for the iteration before we reach a new line. So all we really do from this solution is we loop over the file, and anytime there's a new line, that is my time to calculate the max count, which is going to be the maximum of either the current value or the current sum. And if not, all we're going to do is we're going to just sum up all those various different lines that is from the input. So here's the input from the file. You're going to get this from Advent of Code, but since I've already solved it, I no longer have that as input. But as you can see, these are the this is the input that you get. And as mentioned, these blank lines are going to indicate different elves' calories. So once you were to run this, you will get 70,296. And this is my solution for the first part. Now going back to the second part, part 2 is a little bit different. So I'll kind of read the prompt for that, and I'll also go over this solution as well. So for part 2, by the time you calculate the answer to the elf's question, they've already realized that the elf carrying the most calories of food might eventually run out of snacks. That would be very problematic. To avoid this unacceptable situation, the elves would instead like to know the total calories carried by the top 3 elves carrying the most calories. That way, even if one of those elves run out of snacks, they still have 2 backups. In the example above, the top 3 elves are the 4th elf with 24,000 calories, then the 3rd elf with 11,000 calories, then the 5th elf with 10,000 calories. The sum of the calories carried by these 3 elves is 45,000. So what we're trying to find now is we want to find the top 3 elves carrying the most calories. How many calories are those elves carrying in total? Now, the first thing that came to mind when I was solving this was let's just create an array and we'll store the first, second, and third place max values in each of those. But when I started actually doing the implementation for this, I noticed how verbose it was, because you'd have to constantly check, is it greater than the first place? Well, if it is, you got to swap. Is it greater than the second place? If so, you have to swap. So I kept having to go through this very verbose way of constantly conditionally checking. And the thing that came to my mind was to use a max heap. And I'll uncomment out this section and comment out part one and kind of walk us through that. If you're unfamiliar with what a max heap is a data structure that is essentially a binary tree. And the root node is always going to be the highest value in that tree. And the left and right nodes are going to be less than that root node. But your left nodes, kind of leaf nodes, are always also going to be less than that node. So a max heap is really just a really good data structure to use whenever you're trying to extract out the maximum values. So with that being said, I ended up using a max heap. And it's basically the logic that we use is very similar to what we used in part one. The only difference now that we're doing is anytime there's that new line delimiter, we're also going to insert that value into our heap. And then basically towards the end of the solution, we're just going to loop through from starting at 0 to 3. So we're going to loop a total of 3 different times. And we're going to get those values and add them to our current sum and return the current sum. And I think with this solution, it's also a lot more scalable, because if we now want to change it to, let's say, the top 10 elves or the top 20 elves, it's a lot more easier for us to kind of conceptualize, and it's going to be less verbose than the initial method that I ended up choosing. So those are my solutions that I had for day one of Advent of Code. I'd love to hear some of the solutions that you guys also came up with, so leave them in the comment section below. And without further ado, I will see you in the next video. Bye.